You can love him or hate him, but you've got to admit that President Trump is one of the most important presidents in American history, surviving multiple assassination attempts, lawfare, and media assassinations of character from very powerful enemies, wealthy enemies. He has, despite this, been elected again as President of the United States. No doubt he's a fighting man, a strong man, but what can his ancestry tell us about where his strength comes from? The people he descends from inevitably contributed towards his character. Personality traits and behavioral tendencies are very much genetically heritable and contribute to who we are just as much, if not more so, than our lived experiences do. In this video, I'm going to talk about the Celtic and Germanic tribes that Donald Trump descends from. Other videos talk about Trump's immediate ancestry and what that means, but they don't really talk about what those ancestral groups represent historically. So I'm going to look at the more ancient roots of his ancestry so we can determine what kind of a man he is by looking at his ancestors. I'm talking about his blood, his DNA, the real stuff that makes a man who he is. It's said of Trump that he's a man of high energy, and I wish sometimes that I was as high energy as he was, but unfortunately I tend to lag a bit as the day goes on. Then Magic Mind invited me to try their 7-day challenge. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot. It's not just an energy drink, it's to be used alongside your daily caffeine routine, and it's kind of like a daily vitamin boost for your brain. It helps you stay focused, calm, and energized without the crash that you sometimes get from caffeine, or at least I do. It does contain matcha tea, as well as cordyceps and lion's mane mushrooms, and stress-relieving herbs and adaptogens, and other ingredients that actually support long-term mental clarity. The efficacy of all these ingredients is backed up by over 200 scientific studies. Tastes quite nice too. On the day one, I noticed a slight increase in energy, but over the course of 7 days, I noticed an accumulative effect. The benefits started to stack up, and by the last day, I found it much easier to concentrate on my work. If you'd like to try Magic Mind, then click the link in the description for magicmind.com/survive20 and use my discount code survive20 to get a special offer. They offer free refunds for 100 days if you're not satisfied, so there's really no risk. And you can trust me, this is much better than coffee. We'll begin with Trump's father's side. Trump's German grandfather, Friedrich Trump, migrated to the USA in 1885 at just 16 years old. He then married a woman from his old hometown of Karlstadt, where his parents had owned vineyards. The region still boasts many beautiful vineyards today. Karlstadt is in southwestern Germany, just west of the Odenwald Mountains. According to the biographer Gwenda Blair, the family Trump descends from a lawyer called Hans Trumpf, who settled in Karlstadt in 1608, when it was the Holy Roman Empire. And his descendants changed the spelling of the name from Drumpf to Trumpf, or Trump, much to the amusement of the liberal left-wing American media. This took place during the 30 Years' War, and that sound change in Germany is regional, with northern German regions using the p sound at the end and the southern Germans using the pf, so Trump becomes Trumpf in the southern regions, and D and T are often interchangeable in Germanic languages. So it really isn't actually a name change, it's just a spelling variant of the same name actually. In America, Trump's family actually had to conceal their German origins and pretend they were Swedish to avoid persecution or prejudice from Jewish colleagues in New York who didn't really like German people. This is a little bit ironic because actually all Germanic people sort of have their origin in Sweden, Scandinavia more broadly, where it's believed the Germanic language family and the Germanic people originated. Probably somewhere in eastern central Sweden, not too far from the capital Stockholm. Before the migration of Germanic peoples from Scandinavia into the continent, southern Germany had been a Celtic homeland. People there spoke Celtic languages. Even as recently as the early Iron Age, that area where Trump's father came from is a Celtic region. And those Celtic-speaking people were actually more closely related to Belgians and French people rather than modern Germans. But migrations of Germanic-speaking warriors from the north replaced up to 2/3 of the population of southern Germany. And the early medieval Alemannic tribes and Bavarian tribes of South Germany later on, at the end of the Iron Age, were more related to modern-day people from Denmark, Holland and Sweden, rather than Belgium and France. So the Germanic tribes mixed with the Central Europeans of Celtic descent to make the modern peoples of southern Germany that we know today. In the time of the Roman Emperor Julius Caesar, this part of Germania, as it was known, was inhabited by Germanic tribes such as the Suebi, who are very often depicted in Roman art, as they had regular contact with the Romans. Their warriors were also well known for their distinctive top-knot haircut, which looks rather cool. Sometimes the Swabians fought for the Roman army. Other times, they fought against them and invaded Roman territories. In 406 AD, many Swabians crossed the Rhine along with other Germanic tribes and invaded Roman Gaul. They also went as far as Spain. But the region of Germany that Trump's family came from was at that time also inhabited by Celtic-speaking tribes like the Tulingi. Therefore, we can say Trump's German blood is a mixture of Central European Celtic ancestry and Northern European Germanic tribes as well. The Celts of Iron Age Central Europe were responsible for some of the most important innovations of the Iron Age. They controlled probably the most important salt and copper mines in Europe at the time, and they were responsible for many technological innovations too, including types of knob helmet, certain shields and lances, all of which the Romans later adopted, became the standard of the Roman military. The Germanic people who these Celts mixed with were fierce warriors who repelled the Roman Empire, something few other peoples of the world can boast. And they expanded across Europe during the migration era, becoming one of the most dominant peoples of Europe in the Middle Ages. The German people have subsequently given the world many great inventions, including the printing press, the bicycle, and the motor car. It's understandable. Trump says he's very proud of his German ancestry.
Do you feel any cultured values in yourself?
Well, the people in Karlstad are very reliable, strong people. And I feel that about myself. I'm strong and I'm very reliable. I'm on time. I get things done. And that's basically a whole German culture, not just Karlstad. I mean, that's a German culture. And, you know, I'm proud to have that German blood. There's no question about it. Great stuff.
He attributes traits like reliability and punctuality to his German blood. But what about his fighting spirit? Maybe some of that comes from his mother. Trump's maternal line is also a mixture of Celtic and Germanic peoples, but a completely different Celtic and a completely different Germanic source as well. Trump's father, Fred, married a poor Scottish maid who hailed from a remote island of Harris in the Outer Hebrides and a little fishing village called Tong. Today, islands like Lewis and Skye are popular holiday destinations, drawing tourists from far and wide, boasting beautiful scenery and quaint little fishing villages and an abundance of wildlife, including seals and dolphins and whales. Trump's mother, Mary Ann MacLeod, was the daughter of a fisherman and subsistence farmer, and she was the last in a family of 10 children living in a humble Pebble Dash house in that village, which Trump went to visit back in 2008. The entire MacLeod family spoke Gaelic as their first language. Today, the people of the Hebrides have a mixture of Gaelic ancestry, which originates in Ireland, and Norse ancestry, which came from central Norway in the Viking Age. The Gaels were Celtic, and the Norse were Germanic. So, like the peoples of South Germany, the Hebrideans are a Celto-Germanic mixture. What we call the Western Isles and the Firth of Clyde Isles were known by the Norse as Suðuroyar, the Southern Islands. Gaelic invaders from Ireland, known as the Scotti, began raiding Pictland in the 360s. By the 5th century, a Gaelic-speaking kingdom of Dalriada had been established, which reached its height in the 6th to 7th century. Argyll and the Hebrides became Gaelic, and the Outer Hebrides retain a Gaelic identity to this day, with 1,761 people for whom it is a first language, and that accounts for half of all the Gaelic speakers in Scotland. Vikings began settling the Southern Islands from the 8th century, and by 1098 the Hebrides was formally under Norwegian rule, just like the Northern Isles. This Viking sword hilt was found in a pagan barrow on the Isle of Egg, and is probably the most spectacular example from all of Scotland. In 1831, this extraordinary Norse chess set, made from whale teeth and walrus ivory, was found on the Isle of Lewis. It dates to the 1100s, and the charming and expressive figures provide insight into the world and culture of Norse people. Today, the pieces are on display in the British Museum in London and the Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh. A medieval Icelandic Viking story, known as a saga, tells a tale that gives some insight into what the Hebrides were like in the Viking Age. The specific saga is called Eyrbyggja Saga. In it, a Viking named Bjorn Ketilsson sailed from Norway to go and meet with his brother, Helgi, and also their sisters, who had moved to the Hebrides. But he was very disappointed when he got there to learn that they had adopted the local religion of Christianity, and he thought that was quite shameful for them to abandon the faith of their forefathers. And so he said he would not live with them, he would not remain in the Hebrides, and he chose instead to sail north to Iceland and live there, where he could live among other heathens. So this occurred in the 9th century, and yet the Vikings there were already becoming Christian, to such an extent that they then referred to their brother Bjorn as Bjorn the Easterner, implying that he was too fixed in his ways to adopt Western customs, namely Christianity. The Hebrides actually remained under Norwegian control all the way up until 1266, when the King of Norway signed them over to the Scottish Crown. The people had spoken Norse on the Isle of Lewis, and they continued to do so for perhaps another 200 years alongside Gaelic. But around the 15th century, Gaelic took over and there was no more Norse spoken at all. And subsequently, a mixture of Gaelic and English, Scots English, we call it, has been spoken there, with significant numbers of Gaelic speakers, probably the most Gaelic-speaking part of the British Isles. Scotland is not a particularly religious country these days, but relative to the rest of Scotland, Harris and Lewis have quite a conservative Calvinist population. Despite this, due to the strange remoteness of these islands, some peculiar pagan rituals persisted there as recently as the 18th century. They were recorded by a native Hebridean writer from the Isle of Skye called Martin Martin. In his description of the Western Islands, Martin Martin wrote that in a remote place, a man was wrapped in a cow's hide and left there all night, during which time he would receive the knowledge he sought from his invisible friends. Now these friends are surely the spirits of the dead. The rite is elsewhere named Tachherm, recorded not only among the Gaels, but also the lowlanders, and often involving animal sacrifice. When a man needed to tell the future, he would be wrapped in the smoking hide of a sacrificial ox, and lain down in the wildest recess of some lonely waterfall, which was supposed to block out distracting sounds, as he lay waiting for communication from the invisible beings who would provide the knowledge he required. In more recent times, this custom persisted, not among prophets, but among poets who wanted to receive inspiration. But this died out in the 17th century. The precarious existence of the people of the Hebrides led to at least 6 famines in the 17th and 18th centuries. And then, after that, they had the Highland clearances in the late 18th and early 19th century. This tragedy resulted in many local people emigrating to Canada, the USA, and Australia, and the population of the Outer Hebrides was significantly reduced. The clannish and warlike nature of the Gaelic people also meant that internecine conflicts were not uncommon in the Hebrides. They had always occurred, and the brutal clearances of the islands were actually carried out mainly by other local Hebrideans against their fellow island inhabitants. The combined effect of these centuries of famines and conflicts produced a very hardy people, of whom Trump's mother, Mary MacLeod, is a fine example. The Scots, as a race, also contributed enormously to the success of the British Empire. They were pioneers, often the first to go to grow tea in India and in Sri Lanka, and they were also great engineers. And Trump actually attributes his entrepreneurialism to his mother's Scottish descent.
But you know, actually, that's hidden. Do you know that some of the biggest, smartest, most brilliant leaders in business come from Scotland, and nobody knows it? Or at least, you know, their parents came from Scotland. But Scotland did very well in this country. I'll tell you, it's very, like, we have people, and I know that one group, they're a very successful group. Now, she came from Scotland, great place, and she came over just for the summer, and she was 19, I guess. And she met my father, and they had a very long marriage. I said, I'll never top you on that, Pop. You know, you always want to be a little bit better than your father if you can, a little more. And my father loved that. You know, some fathers don't like it. When you have a father that doesn't want his son to be a success, well, you got a problem with a father.
Trump's uniquely American, Norse Gaelic Hebridean ancestry and Central European Celto-Germanic ancestry have no doubt contributed to his personality and his nature, since we know that personality traits and behavioral tendencies are indeed very much genetically heritable. Unlike most American presidents, he has no old stock American blood at all, and none of his grandparents spoke English as a first language, making him a uniquely European president, while also quintessentially American, enjoying McDonald's as his favorite food. It's very hard to imagine that his Gaelic, Suebian, Norse, Viking, and other Celtic and Germanic ancestors weren't smiling down on him when in July 2024, after surviving being shot, he raised his fists in the air and shouted, "Fight, fight, fight." Thanks for watching this video about Donald Trump and his ancestry. I hope you found it interesting and provided some insight into the man. Don't forget to check out Magic Mind. It's a really nice drink. I really recommend that you try it out at least. Be sure to subscribe to this channel and also have a look at some of the other videos. I've got lots of documentaries about all sorts of areas of European history and DNA as well, if you're into that sort of thing. And if you want to get access to exclusive content, then I recommend you become a patron on Patreon or Subscribestar, where you'll have access to the mountains of exclusive content that I've already produced and content I'm yet to produce, as well as access to exclusive chats with me on Telegram and discounts on my merchandise. Thanks for watching and keep surviving the jive.